After being fired, the black man made one call. "Fire every one of them." The box wasn't heavy. That was the thing Darius kept thinking about as he walked down the front steps of Meridian Financial on a Tuesday morning in October. 14 years of his life, and it all fit inside a cardboard box that a 23-year-old security guard named Brett had handed him without making eye contact. 14 years. The box held a framed photo of his late mother. A coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Accountant" that his cousin had given him as a joke in 2012. A small, succulent plant named Gerald. 3 pens, a yellow legal pad, a stress ball shaped like a basketball. That was it. 14 years, and Gerald the succulent was the heaviest thing in the box. Darius Okafor was 51 years old. He was 6'2", broad-shouldered, with close-cut grey at his temples and hands that had always been steadier than the rest of him. People who didn't know him sometimes crossed the street when they saw him coming. People who did know him called him when they needed someone who would tell them the truth without making them feel small. He had built Meridian's risk assessment division from a 2-person team in a windowless office into a department of 38 analysts. He had steered the firm through the 2008 collapse while their competitors bled out. He had turned down 3 offers from rival firms over the years because loyalty meant something to him. Because he believed, the way some people believe in gravity, that if you did good work and treated people right, the math would eventually work out in your favor. The math had not worked out. The meeting that morning had lasted 11 minutes. 11 minutes for Reginald Holt, the new chief operating officer who had been at Meridian for exactly 7 months, to tell Darius that the company was restructuring its senior leadership footprint and that his position had been eliminated as part of a strategic realignment. Reginald Holt was 34 years old. He had an MBA from a school that Darius had never heard of, a pocket square that matched his tie with surgical precision, and the kind of smile that never touched his eyes. "We appreciate everything you've contributed," Reginald had said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. Darius had looked at the envelope. He had looked at Reginald. He had looked at the 2 HR representatives sitting against the wall like potted plants. Then he had picked up the envelope, stood up, and said, very quietly, "All right." He had not raised his voice. He had not said the dozen things burning a hole through his chest. He had walked back to his office, his former office, and stood there for a moment looking at the view of downtown he'd earned, window by window, over 14 years, until Brett the security guard appeared in the doorway, holding the cardboard box. "I'm sorry, Mr. Okafor," Brett had said, and he actually meant it. Darius could tell. The kid was 23 years old, and he was genuinely sorry. "It's okay, son," Darius had told him. "You're just doing your job." He had packed Gerald and the mug and his mother's photo and the 3 pens and walked out. The October air hit him on the front steps. Chicago in October had a particular kind of cold, not the brutal bone-grinding cold of January, but a warning cold, a "this is what's coming" cold. Wind off the lake. The smell of leaves turning. Darius stopped on the 3rd step from the bottom and breathed it in. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. He needed 60 seconds to just be in the world without anyone needing anything from him. He got about 45. That's when he heard the voices behind him. 3 of them coming down the steps, talking loud the way people do when they want to be overheard. Honestly, it was time. That was Preston Wakefield, head of client relations, a man Darius had mentored personally for 4 years. "Long overdue," said a woman's voice. Donna Briggs, senior vice president of compliance, a woman who had come to Darius's mother's funeral, who had sat in his office 2 years ago crying about her divorce while Darius listened for an hour and a half. The department was bloated anyway. A 3rd voice. Darius didn't turn around to identify it. They walked past him without stopping, without looking at him. Donna Briggs glanced sideways once, met his eyes for half a second, and then looked straight ahead. Darius stood on the steps and watched them go. He thought about his mother. She used to say, "The people who hurt you most are the ones you trusted with your real face. That's not your mistake. That's their debt." He picked up his box. That's when he dropped it. Not dramatically. Gerald the succulent just shifted wrong. The bottom of the box buckled slightly from the morning damp, and everything spilled down the last 3 steps. The mug, the photo frame, the stress ball, the pens rolling in 3 different directions. Gerald hit the sidewalk and lost about a third of his dirt. Darius crouched down on the sidewalk of one of the most expensive blocks in downtown Chicago, in his good gray suit, picking up pens. He heard footsteps stop. Here. A woman was crouching next to him, not pausing on her way somewhere, crouching. She picked up the stress ball, handed it to him. Then she reached for the photo frame, checked to make sure the glass wasn't cracked, and placed it carefully back in the box. She was maybe mid-30s, wearing a wool coat that had been washed too many times, and good shoes that were starting to separate at the toe on the left side. She had kind eyes and a practical ponytail, and the focused look of someone who had a bus to catch, but wasn't going to let that stop her. "I've got Gerald," she said, already scooping dirt back into the pot with her bare hands. Darius looked at her. "You name my plant." Gerald seemed right. She placed the succulent back in the box, patted the dirt gently. "He's going to be okay. Succulents are tough." "So I keep hearing," Darius said. She looked at him then, really looked at him, the way almost nobody on a downtown Chicago sidewalk ever looked at a stranger, like she was actually seeing him, not his size or his color or his cardboard box. Him. "Rough morning?" she asked. 14-year rough morning, he said. She nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." And she meant it, just like Brett had meant it. Except this was different. This was someone with no obligation, no job on the line, no guilt to manage, just a woman who had stopped. "Thank you," Darius said, "for stopping." "Of course," she said, like it was the most natural thing in the world, like stopping was just what you did when someone dropped their box. She stood up, smoothed her coat. "Good luck," she said. "To you and Gerald both." Darius almost smiled. "What's your name?" She hesitated for just a second, the instinctive hesitation of a woman who had learned somewhere along the way to be careful about that question from strangers. Then something in his face must have convinced her. "Celeste," she said. "Celeste Van. Darius Okafor." She nodded once, the way people nod when they actually want to remember a name. Then she walked on. Darius watched her go. She walked fast, purposeful. The left shoe separated a little more at the toe with each step. She turned the corner and was gone. He stood there on the sidewalk for another moment. Then he picked up his box, both arms under it this time properly, and walked toward the parking garage. His phone buzzed again. He took it out and looked at the screen. It was a number he hadn't called in years, a number that appeared in his contacts under a single word, Tower. He didn't answer it yet. He put the phone back in his pocket, settled Gerald more securely in the box, and kept walking. But something had shifted in his chest. The cold, tight thing that had been sitting there since the 11-minute meeting had loosened just slightly, cracked open just a fraction of an inch, because of a woman who had stopped, who had known, without being told, that Gerald needed to be okay, who had looked at him like he was a person. Darius Okafor had spent 14 years at Meridian Financial doing what he did best, assessing risk, calculating what things were actually worth underneath the surface presentation. Reading the numbers that the numbers were hiding, he was very good at it, and something in his chest told him, quiet and certain, the way the really important calculations always came to him, that he had just met someone whose real value nobody around her had bothered to calculate. He was curious about that. For the first time since Brett had handed him the cardboard box, Darius Okafor was genuinely, quietly, surprisingly curious about something that had nothing to do with Meridian Financial. He settled Gerald under his arm. He walked toward his car, and the number labeled Tower buzzed in his pocket one more time, patient and insistent, like a door waiting to be opened. The box wasn't heavy, but everything else, every single thing that came next, would be. The universe has a very specific sense of humor. Celeste Van had learned this the hard way. The day she was valedictorian of her high school class, and her mother was too sick to attend. The day she graduated summa cum laude and spent the same afternoon at an eviction hearing because her ex-husband had stopped paying rent without mentioning it. The universe liked irony. Fine. She had made her peace with it, so she wasn't surprised when the temp agency called that same Tuesday afternoon. The same afternoon, she'd helped a man in a good grey suit pick up his life off a Chicago sidewalk and told her they had a placement. "What firm?" she asked. "Meridian Financial," the coordinator said. Celeste paused. The universe was doing it again. "What time do I start?" she said. She arrived Wednesday at 7:45 because she always arrived 15 minutes early. Not because anyone told her to, because she'd been late to something important once, years ago, and she'd never forgiven herself. The Meridian lobby was designed to make you feel small. Marble floors, ceilings high enough to swallow your confidence. A reception desk on a raised platform so you always looked up at whoever was behind it. The receptionist had burgundy nails and no interest in looking up. "Name," she said. "Celeste Van. Temp placement from Clark Staffing." "Hold on." Brianna, she'd learn the name later, typed something, sighed in a way that communicated Celeste was a minor inconvenience, and pointed at the elevator. 14th floor. Ask for Pamela." "Thank you," Celeste said. Brianna had already looked back at her screen. Pamela ran the executive floor like someone who had once cared deeply about her job and spent the last several years grieving that version of herself. "You're replacing Linda," she said, walking Celeste to a small desk in the corridor connecting the main office to the executive suite. "Linda has a situation." "I hope she's okay," Celeste said. Pamela gave her the look of someone who had long stopped asking that question. "The coffee machine takes specific pods. I'll show you. Don't touch the espresso machine. That's for VPs only." "Of course." "Your job. Manage the executive calendar, field internal calls, sort correspondence, prepare morning briefing packets. Style guide is in the top left drawer. Follow it exactly." Pamela studied her. "Are you a fast learner?" "I've been told I am." "We'll see," Pamela said, and walked away. By 10 o'clock, Celeste had mastered the calendar system, reorganized a 3-week correspondence backlog, and found an error in the Friday briefing packet that would have sent 7 senior executives to the wrong conference room. She fixed it without mentioning it to anyone. She was halfway through her first acceptable pod coffee when the corner office door swung open and a man came out wearing a suit that cost as much as her monthly rent. He stopped when he saw her. "You're new," he said. "I'm Celeste, covering for Linda." He said her name the way you say a word you've already decided isn't worth remembering. "I need the Hargrove account summary on my desk by 11. "Of course. Is it in the system or physical files?" He stared at her like she'd asked where the sky was. "System. Folder marked priority active." Each word, a stone he had to lift. "Bind it. And don't do it wrong. The last temp bound it upside down. Embarrassed me in front of a client." "I won't do it upside down," Celeste said. He stopped halfway back to his office, turned, looked at her like he hadn't decided yet whether she'd said something impressive or something insubordinate. Then he went inside and closed the door. Pamela appeared at Celeste's elbow, appearing from nowhere. "That's Preston Wakefield, head of client relations. Just do what he asks and don't volunteer anything." "Okay." Pamela hesitated. "He wasn't always like this," she said quietly, like a confession. Celeste looked at her, the circles under her eyes, the way she held her coffee mug with both hands, like it was keeping her afloat. "How long have you been here?" 11 years. "Then you've seen a lot change," Celeste said. Pamela looked at her for a long moment. "You could say that." She straightened. "Hargrove file. By 11. Celeste found the file, built the summary, bound it correctly, and had it on Preston's desk by 10:47. At 11:33, he walked past her desk without acknowledgement. At 12:15, she heard him in the hallway telling someone on his phone that his new temp was adequate, I suppose, and that he hoped Linda came back soon. Celeste ate her turkey sandwich at her desk because the break room was 2 floors down, and she only had 30 minutes, and she was reorganizing the December calendar. A woman appeared. Maybe 50, silver-haired, blazer fitted to intimidate. "Is that your lunch?" the woman said. "Yes, I'm sorry. Should I not eat it? You're the temp." Celeste Van, covering for Linda. Donna Briggs, SVP of Compliance. The way she said it expected recognition. "I need the Q3 audit cross-reference. the one the previous senior director was preparing, risk assessment shared folder. "I'll find it," Celeste said. Donna Briggs looked at the sandwich again. "You should eat in the break room. It looks unprofessional." And she walked away. Celeste looked at her sandwich. She thought about the man on the steps, the box, the 3 people who walked past him without stopping. One of them had been a woman in a blazer. She put the sandwich back in its wax paper and went looking for the file. It took 20 minutes to find because it had been misfiled under Q2, not by Darius, someone in the 3 weeks since he'd been gone. She corrected the misfiling while she was in there, then brought Donna Briggs the document. "It had been filed under the wrong quarter," Celeste said. "I corrected it. The full Q3 folder is now in order if you need anything else." Donna Briggs looked at her. "I didn't ask you to do that." "No," Celeste agreed. "You didn't." Donna Briggs took the document. "You may go." By 3 o'clock she had handled 17 calls, rerouted 4 incorrectly scheduled meetings, prepared Thursday's briefing packets, and fixed the 15th floor printer that had been jamming every 40 minutes because someone kept restarting it instead of replacing the wrong weight paper. At 3:15, Preston called from his office. "Rebook the Hargrove dinner? Thursday, Spiaggia, 7, private dining room." "Guest count?" she asked. A pause. 4. Why? Private rooms have different configurations. Some work better for 4 than others. Lakeview or more privacy? A longer pause. His voice came back 2 degrees less cold. "Lakeview. I'll confirm it." She booked it. Lakeview, 7 o'clock. She also requested complimentary amuse-bouches through Meridian's preferred client arrangement, something Linda had apparently never bothered to use. She mentioned it to no one. At 5:45, alone on the 14th floor, her phone rang. Internal extension, from 15. "Celeste Van." A pause. Then, "I have a question." Donna Briggs. The armor was gone about 4 layers. The Q3 cross-reference, the misfiling, do you know when it happened? Celeste chose her words carefully. "The metadata shows it was moved about 3 weeks ago." Silence. "Thank you," Donna Briggs said quietly. "That's all." The line went dead. Celeste sat in the quiet of the empty floor for a moment. 3 weeks ago. She thought about a man in a grey suit crouching on a sidewalk. About Donna Briggs's face when she'd started to say Darius and caught herself. She thought about how guilt worked on people who hadn't made peace with what they'd done. Then she gathered her things, said goodnight to the empty room, and left. The lobby was empty when she crossed it. The marble clicked under her shoes. The left one separated a little more at the toe. She pushed through the front door into the October evening, and at the coffee cart on the corner, the one that should have been closed an hour ago but somehow wasn't, stood a man in a worn brown jacket. Tall, grey at the temples, looking at the menu board with the unhurried attention of someone with nowhere particular to be. She stopped. He turned, and Darius Okafor smiled at her, easy, unsurprised, like he'd been fairly certain she'd walk out those doors eventually. "Gerald made it through the day," he said, "in case you were wondering." Celeste looked at him. She thought about the universe and its very specific sense of humor. "How is he?" she asked. "Tough," Darius said. "Like I said," and neither of them moved toward the corner. They just stood there in the October cold, with the cart between them and the light changing, and something happening that neither of them had a good word for yet. Celeste Van had made peace with the universe's irony a long time ago. She was beginning to think maybe the punchline was something entirely different than she'd assumed. The coffee cart was run by a man named Thomas, who had been working the same corner for 11 years, and who had a theory that the best conversations in Chicago happened standing up, in weather just cold enough to make people honest. Thomas poured 2 cups without being asked. "On the house," he said. Darius looked at him. "You don't do that." "Tonight I do." Thomas pushed the cups across and went back to wiping down his machine. Celeste wrapped both hands around her cup. It was the same instinctive gesture Pamela used with her mug upstairs, she realized. The holding on posture. She made herself relax her grip. You were waiting, she said. I was getting coffee, Darius said, at a cart that closes at 4. He looked at her. Tomas kept it open. Because you asked him to. Darius considered this. I tipped him $40 this morning and told him I might be back. So you were waiting. I was hedging my bets, he said. There's a difference. She almost smiled. You're a financial person. Was, he said. Flat, not bitter, just accurate. They stood there for a moment. Chicago did what Chicago does in early evening. Taxis and buses, the distant horn of the L, people walking fast with their chins down, October air mixing with the burned coffee sweetness off Tomas's machine. You work there now, Darius said. It wasn't a question. Temp, covering for someone named Linda. He nodded slowly. How was it? Celeste thought about Preston Wakefield, Donna Briggs, the sandwich, the breakroom comment, the file that had been misfiled 3 weeks ago by someone who hadn't cared enough to check. Educational, she said. He made a sound, not quite a laugh, but close. That's the right word. How long were you there? 14 years. He said it without drama, like he was reporting a fact about someone else. 14 years. Celeste did the quiet math of that. 14 years meant he'd watched that building change around him, new people cycling in, the furniture shifting while he stayed anchored. When Brett the security guard handed him that box, it hadn't been a job he'd lost. It had been a world. I'm sorry, she said. You already said that yesterday. I know, it still applies. He looked at her over his cup. There was something in his face she was starting to recognize, the quality of attention he paid. Most people listened the way they checked their phones, partially with most of their processing happening somewhere else. Darius listened like he'd turned everything else off. What are you doing at a temp agency? He asked. She blinked. What do you mean? I mean... He turned slightly, leaning one arm on the cart's counter the way you do when you're settling in. You spent 8 hours in that building today. You fixed the Hargrove summary, reorganized 3 weeks of correspondence, corrected a Q3 misfiling, fixed the 15th floor printer, and used Meridian's preferred client arrangement at Spiaggia that nobody had bothered to touch in at least a year. Celeste stared at him. How do you... Pamela texted me. He said it simply. She texts me sometimes. She's one of about 4 people in that building I actually trust. You've been getting reports on me. I've been getting reports on Pamela's day, he said. You were the interesting part. He tilted his head slightly. She said, and I'm quoting here, the new temp found everything I've been looking for since October. And she fixed the printer on 15. 11 years, and nobody fixed that printer. Celeste looked down at her cup. So, Darius said, temp agency. She took a breath. The honest version or the polished version. She looked at this man, his steady attention, the worn jacket over what she was realizing was a very expensive shirt, the way he'd waited at a coffee cart and called it hedging his bets, and she chose honest. I had a company, she said, small accounting firm, 3 partners. We'd been building it for 6 years. She paused. One of my partners decided he wanted to take it in a different direction, and that the cleanest way to do that was to remove me from it. He had a lawyer. I didn't. The operating agreement was... She stopped. It was my fault. I trusted people I'd known for years, and I didn't read the fine print because reading the fine print felt like saying I didn't trust them. Silence. He bought me out at a fraction of what my share was worth, she said. I had enough to live on while I figured out next steps. I've been doing temp work for 8 months. Darius said nothing for a moment. What was your specialty? He asked. Risk assessment and audit compliance. She said it and watched his expression change. Not dramatically, just a very slight shift around the eyes. I know. The irony is not lost on me. I was good at assessing other people's risk structures and completely missed the one in my own business. That's not irony, Darius said. That's the thing nobody tells you about risk assessment. You can map every danger in a system except the ones that depend on people you love. Something about the precision of that, the way he'd put it, landed in her chest with a small, quiet weight. Yeah, she said. Exactly that. He was looking at her in a way that was careful and direct at the same time. Not the way Preston Wakefield looked at her, sizing her up for usefulness and finding her borderline acceptable. Something else. Something more like the way you look at a ledger when the numbers are more interesting than you expected. Can I ask you something? He said. You've been asking me things since you tipped Tomas $40, she said. That got an actual smile. Small but real. What are you actually worth? He asked. She opened her mouth to deflect, to do the thing you do when someone asks a direct question and you're not sure it's safe to answer it directly. Then she looked at him again, at the steadiness of his attention, and she stopped. More than a temp rate, she said. How much more? That depends on what someone needs. What if someone needed someone who could walk into a firm where nobody knew them and within 8 hours understand exactly what was broken and why, and fix it quietly without needing to be told to, and identify a pattern in a misfiled document that connected to a personnel decision 3 weeks prior? And all of this while being told by a VP that her sandwich was unprofessional. Celeste went very still. You know about the sandwich, she said. Donna Briggs has a big mouth when she's uncomfortable, Darius said. She also texted Pamela. Does everyone in that building text Pamela? Only the people who feel guilty about something, he said. The evening had gotten darker while they were talking. Tomas had turned on the small light he kept for exactly these situations. Late customers, long conversations, the corner needing a little warmth. What are you actually asking me? Celeste said. Darius turned his cup in his hands, looked at it. I have a meeting tomorrow morning, he said. With some people I've been avoiding calling back for about 3 days. I need someone with a strong audit compliance background to look at some documents before I go in. He looked up. Not a favor. I pay fairly. She studied him. What kind of documents? 14 years of decisions that someone at Meridian has been rewriting the history of, he said, and an operating structure that doesn't look the way they told their board it looks. Celeste felt something click into place. The feeling she always got when a number that looked wrong turned out to be the key to understanding why everything else looked wrong. You've been building a case, she said. He looked at her with the expression of someone who is deciding how much to confirm. I've been assessing risk, he said carefully, for a project I've been working on for a while. The people you've been avoiding calling back, she said. They're investors? A pause. You're fast, he said. I told you, Celeste said. More than a temp rate. Tomas materialized with a small container of sugar he hadn't asked them if they wanted, set it on the counter, and disappeared again. 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, Darius said. The documents will be at... He stopped. Actually, can I text you an address? She thought about it for exactly 4 seconds. She'd spent 8 years learning to read the fine print. She was reading it now. And what the fine print said was, this man waited at a closed coffee cart and tipped $40 because he wanted to make sure you'd have somewhere warm to stand. Yes, she said. She gave him her number. He sent a text immediately. A building address in River North. The kind of building that had a lobby with art in it and an address that meant something. She looked at it. She looked at him. What exactly do you do? She asked. Now, not at Meridian. What do you do? And Darius Okafor in his worn brown jacket and his very expensive shirt looked at her with that small, careful smile and said, assessment, mostly, and left it at that. Celeste Van walked home that night thinking about a man who'd waited at a coffee cart. She was good at reading numbers that were hiding something. She just hadn't decided yet exactly what this particular number was hiding, only that it was more than it appeared. In her experience, those were always the most interesting ones. The address Darius had texted her was on West Erie Street, in the part of River North where the buildings had names instead of numbers. Celeste stood on the sidewalk at 7:58 the next morning and looked at it. It was 14 stories of clean glass and dark steel, the kind of building that doesn't announce itself because it doesn't have to. No signage on the lobby door, no branding on the awning, just a tasteful bronze plate to the right of the entrance, the kind you had to walk close to actually read. She walked close. Okafor Tower. Private. She read it twice. Then she looked up at the building again, all 14 stories of it, and thought about a man in a worn jacket who had called himself a financial person in the past tense and said he did assessment, mostly, and had tipped a coffee cart operator $40 to stay open past 4. She straightened her coat. She went inside. The lobby had art in it, not reproductions, actual art. A painting she recognized from an exhibit she'd seen at the Art Institute 3 years ago, that she'd later looked up and found had sold at auction for more than she'd made in the previous 4 years combined. There was a desk. The woman behind it had the quiet, exact efficiency of someone who had been hired specifically to separate the people who belonged from the people who thought they did. "Celeste Van," Celeste said, "I have a meeting with Darius Okafor." The woman nodded without checking anything. She'd apparently been expecting her. 12th floor. "Mr. Okafor is already in the conference room. I'll let him know you're on your way up." The elevator had 1 button per floor and moved without any sound at all. Darius was standing at a window when she walked in, coffee in hand, looking out at the city with the expression of someone who has a complicated relationship with a view. The conference room was large, quiet, and set up with 2 laptops, a stack of bound documents, and a second cup of coffee she suspected was hers. He turned when she came in. "You found it," he said. "There was a sign," she said. A beat. "Your name is on the building," Celeste said. "It is," he agreed. "You didn't mention that. You didn't ask what building it was." She looked at him for a moment with the expression she usually reserved for numbers that had been deliberately hidden in plain sight. "Darius," she said. "Who are you?" He pulled out a chair for her at the conference table. Not in a formal, stiff way, the way you pull out a chair for someone when you've been raised by a mother who would have had opinions about it. "Sit," he said. "I'll explain while you look at the documents. It'll go faster." She sat. He poured her coffee. And over the next 40 minutes, he explained. The Okafor Group had been founded by his father, Emeka Okafor, in 1987, a real estate and financial services company built from a single apartment building in Bronzeville that Emeka had bought with money borrowed from a church congregation that believed in him when no bank would. By the time Darius was in college, the Okafor Group owned commercial properties in 4 cities. By the time Darius was 30, it had expanded into institutional investment and private equity. Darius had gone to work at Meridian Financial deliberately. Not because he needed the salary had been, by his own description, almost insulting given what he came from, but because Meridian had a risk assessment division that was considered among the best in the Midwest, and he had wanted to learn it from the inside. He had wanted to understand the machine before he built his own version of it. "You went undercover," Celeste said. "I went to school," he said. "The difference is intent." "But they didn't know." "They knew I had a finance background," he said. "They didn't know the specifics. I didn't hide anything. I just didn't volunteer it, like you said yesterday. There's fine print people don't read." Celeste thought about that. "And in 14 years, nobody figured it out." "3 people figured it out," he said. "Pamela, Tomas, and my mother's doctor." "Your mother's doctor?" "She was on the board of a hospital Okafor Group funded. She put it together at my mother's last checkup." He said this without elaborating, and Celeste didn't push it. "There are rooms in a person you learn to read from the outside." "The people you've been avoiding calling back," Celeste said, flipping to the 3rd document in the stack. "These are Okafor Group institutional partners." "Yes." "And they want to move on Meridian." "They've been watching Meridian for 2 years, Darius said. "They asked me 18 months ago if I wanted to be part of it. I said I needed time." "Why?" He looked at his coffee. "Because I wanted to leave on my own terms." Celeste absorbed that. "They took that option away from you," she said. "They did," he agreed. She turned another page. Numbers, reorganization filings. She ran her eye down a column and stopped. "This restructuring," she said slowly. "The one they used to fire you. The strategic realignment," he said, with the kind of weight that meant he had heard those exact words many times since Tuesday and hadn't stopped hearing them. "It was enacted in a way that makes the leadership changes permanent," she said. "But the board approval signature on page 6, she turned the document and held it up. This wasn't a full board vote. This was 3 board members acting under emergency provision. Were you on the board? A pause. I declined a board seat when they offered it 4 years ago, he said. At the time I thought I was being principled. They used a 3-person emergency provision because they needed to exclude you specifically, she said. If you'd been on the board, they couldn't have done it without your vote. Darius looked at her, steady and still, and something behind his eyes that was not anger exactly, more like the feeling you get when something you suspected turns out to be precisely as bad as you thought. That's what I needed confirmed, he said. I saw the shape of it. I needed someone to walk through it fresh and tell me I wasn't reading what I wanted to read. You're not, Celeste said. This is a deliberate procedural exclusion. And it was set up at least 8 months ago. Look at this amendment language. She flipped back 2 pages. This provision didn't exist in the bylaws before March. Someone added it. Reginald Holt was brought on in March, Darius said quietly. The room was very still. Outside the 12th floor windows, Chicago moved its morning traffic through the streets below. Up here it was quiet enough to hear the city's own breathing. Who is Reginald Holt actually working for? Celeste asked. Darius picked up his coffee. That, he said, is the question. He set it down. I have a call this afternoon with 3 people who have been trying to answer that same question for 6 months. That's the meeting I've been avoiding. Why avoiding? Because once I take that call, he said, I'm not in this halfway anymore. She looked at him across the conference table, with the documents spread between them and the city below, and the building with his name on it around them. You've been deciding, she said, whether to actually do this. I've been deciding, he confirmed. What made you call me last night? I didn't call you. I waited at a coffee cart. Same difference. He looked at her, and for the first time the careful, measured quality he kept around himself like a second jacket dropped just slightly. You fixed the printer on 15, he said. Nobody asked you to. You found a misfiled document and you corrected the whole folder without mentioning it to anyone. You ate your sandwich at your desk in wax paper when someone told you it looked unprofessional, and then you went and found the file they needed. He paused. I spent 14 years in that building, watching people protect themselves while things got worse. You spent one day fixing things quietly. He looked down at his coffee. I needed to be reminded that that kind of person exists. Celeste sat with that. Outside, a cloud moved, and the morning light came through the window and lit the conference table and the documents and the 2 cups of coffee and the city beyond the glass. All right, she said. Walk me through everything you have. He looked up. Something settled in his face, like a decision being made. All of it, he asked. All of it, she said. We have until your afternoon call. He opened the first laptop, and Darius Okafor, who had spent 14 years waiting patiently for the math to work out in the favor of good people, began to show Celeste Van exactly how broken the math at Meridian Financial had become. On the 14th floor of Meridian Financial, Preston Wakefield was telling someone on the phone that the restructuring had gone perfectly. He did not know that 2 miles away, on the 12th floor of a building with a name he should have recognized, someone was reading the fine print, someone who was very, very good at it. The call happened at 2 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon, not dramatically, not in a room full of people. Darius sat at the 12th floor conference table with his phone and a glass of water and the 43-page document summary that Celeste had compiled over the previous 5 hours, organized, cross-referenced, annotated in the margins in her precise handwriting, and he dialed. 3 people answered from 3 different area codes. Darius, said the first voice, a woman named Vivian Sato, who ran institutional investments out of Toronto. She'd been trying to reach him for 6 days. Her voice was careful and warm. I'm glad you called. I have documentation, Darius said. Full audit trail. The emergency provision used to remove me was added to Meridian's bylaws 8 months ago, 4 months before Reginald Holt joined the company, which means he was placed at Meridian and the provision was written at the same time by the same people. Silence on the line. Then the second voice, a man named Conrad Pierce, who managed the largest single pension fund in the Pacific Northwest. Do you have the amendment provenance? Page 12, Darius said. Law firm of record is Easton Gould. They incorporated 4 shell companies for Meridian in the same quarter. One of them funnels to the same address as a holding company that appears on Reginald Holt's previous employment history under a different name. Who did the analysis? Vivian asked. Darius looked across the table at Celeste, who was reading the document one more time, pencil behind her ear, coffee going cold. Someone with better eyes than mine, he said. A pause. What do you want to do? Conrad asked. Darius picked up his glass of water. Set it down. I want to do what I should have done 18 months ago, he said. Move on Meridian, full acquisition, board restructure, and I want a compliance audit of every major decision made in the last 9 months by the acting COO. That last part will cause, the third voice began. Arlo Webb, London-based, who had been the quietest of the 3. I know what it will cause, Darius said. Do it anyway. A beat. It'll take 72 hours to set the mechanics in motion, Vivian said. The board announcement will hit Friday of next week at the latest. Fine, Darius said. And Darius. Vivian's voice dropped 1 register. When we acquire the leadership structure, I'll send you a memo by morning, he said. He ended the call. The conference room was quiet. Celeste looked up from her document. She'd heard most of it from across the table. She hadn't tried not to. 72 hours, she said. Give or take, Darius said. What happens to the people who are complicit? The shell companies, the plant, Reginald Holt? The audit will find what it finds, Darius said. I'm not in the revenge business. She studied him. But you told them to investigate every major decision in the last 9 months. Because some of those decisions affected people who deserved better, he said simply. I want a record. I want it documented. After that, he shrugged. The truth does its own work. Celeste thought about the man on the steps, the box, the 3 people who had walked past. What about Preston Wakefield? She asked. What about him? He spent 4 years as your mentee, she said. You built part of what he is. Darius was quiet for a moment. I know, he said. And that was all he said about it. But Celeste heard what was in those 2 words. The particular grief of someone who has discovered that the investment they made in a person did not produce the person they thought they were building. And Donna Briggs? She asked. She called me this morning, Darius said, before you got here. Celeste blinked. What did she say? She said she was sorry. He paused. She also said she'd found evidence of 3 unauthorized access events on the risk assessment server in the 2 weeks before I was let go. Files were moved. Some were copied to external sources. He looked at Celeste. Your Q3 misfiling wasn't carelessness. Someone misfiled it intentionally to obscure the audit trail. They were covering their tracks, Celeste said, and they used 3 weeks of my work to do it, he said. Donna put it together when you pointed out the metadata timestamp. Celeste sat with that. A small act, noticing a date in a file's metadata, reporting it honestly, had loosened a thread that, when pulled, had started to unravel something much larger. The universe, she said softly, almost to herself. What? Darius said. Nothing. She closed the document. What do you need from me between now and Friday? He looked at her. What do you need? He said. She blinked. I'm sorry. You've been here since 8 in the morning. You've put together a 43-page compliance summary in 5 hours that my institutional partners just used to greenlight a 9-figure acquisition. You've been asking me all day what I need. He tilted his head. I'm asking you. Celeste opened her mouth, closed it. She thought about the temp agency, the left shoe separating at the toe, the break room comment about the sandwich. 8 months of being adequate, I suppose. A job, she said, a real one. What kind? One where someone needs someone who can walk into a broken system and fix it without needing to be told to. She paused. With a salary that reflects what that's actually worth. Darius nodded slowly. The Okafor Group's Risk and Compliance Division has been without a director for 14 months, he said. We've been using a consulting firm. I've been dissatisfied with the results. Celeste stared at him. I'm a temp, she said. You were a partner at an accounting firm for 6 years before someone used the fine print against you, he said. You have an audit compliance background, and you just demonstrated in one day that your instincts are better than most of what I've seen in this city." He picked up his coffee. "The fine print in our employment agreements is fair. I'll have legal send it over this afternoon." "You want me to read the fine print?" she said. "I insist on it," he said. "And then I want you to negotiate anything you don't like. That's a thing you're allowed to do." Something happened in Celeste's chest. Not the dramatic thing you might expect, not tears or relief or the Hollywood music swell. Something quieter. Something more like a locked door after a very long time, finally being handed its key. "All right," she said. "All right," he said. Friday of the following week, the board announcement hit at 9 o'clock in the morning. Preston Wakefield was in a client meeting when his phone lit up. He stepped into the hallway and read the notification twice. Meridian Financial to be acquired by Okafor Group Institutional Consortium. Full board restructure, effective immediately. Compliance audit of Q4 executive decisions to commence Monday. He stood in the hallway for a long time. He thought about 4 years of mentorship, an office door that was always open, a man who had listened, really listened, every time Preston came in with a problem or a fear. He had walked past him on those steps. He had kept walking. Preston Wakefield stood in the hallway of Meridian Financial and understood, with a clarity that felt almost physical, exactly what he had traded away. Donna Briggs got the announcement in the parking garage. She sat with it for a long time. Then she called Pamela, the number she'd dialed more times this week than in the previous year combined. "Pamela," she said. "I know," Pamela said. You need to talk to the audit team," Pamela said gently, "and tell them everything." A silence. "Okay," Donna Briggs said, smaller than she'd ever sounded. "I'll walk you through it," Pamela said. Reginald Holt called 3 lawyers in 40 minutes. The 4th call confirmed what the 3rd had suggested. The shell company structure, cross-referenced with the bylaw amendment dating and Donna Briggs's access logs, constituted a pattern that lawyers alone could not fix. He was escorted from the building on Monday morning. He carried a cardboard box. Nobody stopped to help him. Darius watched none of this happen directly. He was in a meeting on the 12th floor with 3 institutional partners and the new director of risk and compliance for the Okafor Group, who was reading a preliminary audit finding with her pencil behind her ear and her coffee going cold, and who had, in 8 days, already found 4 governance irregularities the previous consulting firm had missed in 14 months. He watched her work. He thought about a Tuesday in October, a sidewalk, a box, a woman who had crouched down without being asked and known, without being told, that the succulent needed to be okay. He thought, the math worked out. Celeste looked up from the document. "Something funny?" she said. "No," he said. "Something right." She held his gaze for a moment, just a moment, and looked back at her work. Gerald the succulent sat on the windowsill where Darius had placed him on day 2, catching the October light, green and steady. Like a plant that had learned to be tough. Like all the best things had. The box had not been heavy. Everything that came after, the audit, the acquisition, the unraveling of a lie, none of it was easy. But none of it was wasted. That, as it turned out, was how the math worked when you let good people do the counting. The end.